A police K-9 suddenly blocked a nurse from entering the ICU. No one knew why until the hospital audit uncovered something terrifying. What they found buried in the records left the entire staff speechless. Could a dog really sense what an entire hospital missed? The full story starts now. But hey, before we jump in, drop your dog's name in the comments so we know who our real heroes are. And if you haven't hit that subscribe button yet, now's the time, because trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. The fluorescent lights of Northridge Regional Hospital buzzed softly above the late-night skeleton crew. Monitors beeped in rhythm with fragile heartbeats. Nurses moved with tired but practiced precision, and somewhere down the ICU corridor, a police K-9 stood still as stone, refusing to let anyone pass. Officer Lucas Grant had been reassigned to hospital security detail only 2 weeks earlier, partnered with Juno, a black German shepherd with sharp instincts and a calm, watchful gaze. Unlike other dogs in the force, Juno had received specialized training in pharmacological trace detection, a rare skill especially valuable after a series of incidents in another district revealed drug tampering in hospital settings. Lucas had hesitated when he first accepted the post. After 7 years on the street beat and 2 working K-9 narcotics raids, a hospital post felt like a step down. But ever since a torn ligament sidelined his mobility, field work had become unsustainable. At least with Juno, there was purpose. And after what happened tonight, he would never doubt that purpose again. It began during the 2 a.m. rounds. The ICU wing was quiet, too quiet. Several of the terminal care patients had fallen into uneasy rest, monitors flickering with fragile stability. The scent of antiseptic hung heavy in the air. Lucas walked the corridor slowly, Juno by his side, her gait fluid and alert. At the far end of the ICU corridor stood Nurse Emily Sloan, tapping something on a digital chart tablet. She glanced up, gave a nod, and moved toward the double doors that separated the observation hallway from the main ICU. She was a familiar face. Short brown hair, slim build, always composed, always polite. One of the hospital's most trusted staff. That was when Juno stopped. Her body stiffened. Her ears pricked forward. Her tail rose just slightly. Then came the low growl, a sound Lucas had learned to respect. Juno was trained not to bark unless absolutely necessary, so when she growled, something was off. Emily slowed her approach, her brow furrowed. "Something wrong?" she asked, her voice even. Lucas studied Juno. The dog was standing directly in front of the ICU door now, her body squarely between Emily and the entrance. She made no move to step aside. "She's not letting you in," Lucas said, puzzled. "I need to administer medication to bed 314, Emily explained, glancing at her tablet. "It's time sensitive." Juno's growl deepened. Lucas gave the standard cue for her to stand down. She didn't budge. "Sorry," he said, managing a smile. "Mind waiting here a sec?" She must have caught a scent she doesn't like. Emily's expression didn't change, but her foot tapped once against the linoleum. "We're on a strict protocol tonight. I have 15 minutes to complete the round." Lucas nodded, and with a soft command redirected Juno's focus. The dog remained on edge, her attention still on the nurse, posture tense but controlled. Emily held up a small pouch from her coat pocket. "These are her meds. Oral, nothing injected. Maybe she smells something from earlier?" Juno's nose twitched. Her focus didn't shift from the nurse. Lucas gently motioned her away. "Let me take a look at her chart and meds before you head in, just to clear everything." There was a brief hesitation. Emily's eyes narrowed slightly, barely perceptible, but Lucas caught it. "No problem," she replied after a pause. "I'll wait here." Juno kept her gaze locked even as Lucas walked away with the tablet. Back in the monitoring room, Lucas scanned the logs. Bed 314. An elderly patient named Margaret Kessler, stage 4 renal failure. Multiple complications. Administered medications on a strict time code. Everything looked normal. Yet something tugged at him. Lucas went back and replayed the past 2 nights' surveillance footage in the ICU med prep room. Mostly empty halls. Nothing unusual, but one clip caught his eye. Nurse Sloan entering the room during a lull between rotations. She appeared to be logging medication, but something about the posture seemed off. Too careful. Too calculated. Lucas noted the timestamp and toggled to the pharmacy log. 2:17 a.m., 200 milligrams of Taraxil, an anti-inflammatory used in renal patients. No issue there. But the footage showed her holding 2 vials. Only one was scanned in. Was it a shadow, or was there something more? Before he could think further, Juno let out a single sharp bark from the hall, one that echoed down the tiled walls. Lucas rushed out. Emily was still standing in the same spot, but her posture had changed. She now stood closer to the ICU doors, hand half lifted toward the scanner pad, as if hoping to slip through. Juno had moved closer again, blocking her path completely. "I told you I needed to get in," she said, trying to maintain composure. But now, there was tension in her voice. "I just need to verify something with pharmacy," Lucas said calmly. "Can you wait while I do that?" Emily lowered her hand. Of course, still no incident, no proof, but Juno's unwavering presence suggested more than coincidence. Lucas reached the pharmacy window and explained the situation. Dr. Meera Patel, the night pharmacist, frowned as she scanned the logs. Sloan requested a Taraxil refill during the shift change 2 days ago. That batch was sealed and bar-coded. There's no way she could have tampered with it unless she had a second vial, Lucas finished. Meera nodded. "But we track every vial. There is no secondary dose assigned to her. Could she be bringing it from somewhere else?" Meera leaned in. "That's a serious violation, Officer Grant." "Exactly why I need to ask this next favor," he said, handing her a flash drive. "This footage from earlier tonight, can you check if the vial in her hand is the same as the bar-coded one issued?" Meera pulled up a comparison from her inventory screen. 10 minutes later, she confirmed Lucas's suspicion. The vial in the footage had no label. None. No identifier. Juno hadn't been wrong. Lucas returned to the ICU corridor. Emily was gone. The nurse's station reported she had stepped away to get fresh air. Lucas's jaw tensed. He scanned the floor plan. There were only 2 exit routes she could have taken, one through the loading bay and the other through the rear staff door. Neither had sign-outs registered. No surprise there. He called for backup. An hour later, security confirmed that Nurse Sloan had not left through the hospital's registered employee exits. She had, however, deactivated her ID badge at the lab disposal chute door. Inside the chute room, officers found an empty cosmetic pouch and a second medication cart, partially dismantled and stored behind a false wall panel. The contents included 3 unregistered vials. 2 had traces of non-prescribed immunosuppressant compounds dangerous for renal patients. The third was empty. It took only 1 phone call to initiate a hospital-wide audit. What began as a routine patrol had turned into something far larger. As dawn approached, administrators gathered in the operations office, eyes wide with disbelief as Lucas and Juno presented the timeline. "There's no direct evidence she administered anything," one supervisor insisted. "But we do have this," Lucas replied, playing the surveillance clip. "And this," he added, setting the unregistered vials on the desk. Dr. Patel stood beside him. "If she gave this to Margaret Kessler, it could have triggered a multi-organ reaction. She is already in critical care. This compound would have suppressed her immune function even further." "Why?" someone asked quietly. "Why would a nurse do something like this?" Lucas looked at Juno, who now rested calmly beside him, still alert. "Sometimes," Lucas said, "the dogs see what we don't." There was silence in the room, not from disbelief, but dawning realization. Margaret Kessler had survived the night. Her vitals were being stabilized by the ICU team. She never received the vial Emily had been carrying. The nurse had been interrupted by a dog. Juno. Lucas returned to the ICU as the sun pierced through the morning haze, golden light seeping into the sterile white of the hospital corridor. Margaret was still sleeping peacefully now. The monitor beeped gently beside her. Juno stood at the doorway watching her quietly, then slowly turned to Lucas. She wagged her tail once, as if she knew. The audit began before noon. Lucas stood quietly near the administration wing as the hospital's internal review board gathered. His uniform still smelled faintly of antiseptic and adrenaline. Juno sat beside him, posture upright but calm, alert eyes darting between every passerby. Across the table sat Dr. Talia Brinks, the hospital's compliance officer, with two assistants working feverishly through medication logs. Pharmacy Director Meera Patel sat next to her, flanked by legal counsel. The atmosphere was a mix of disbelief, urgency, and dread. "Start with the last 2 weeks," Lucas suggested, keeping his tone controlled. Medication logs, shift reports, and patient deterioration incidents, especially any cases involving Nurse Sloan. Dr. Brinks hesitated. "Are we treating her as a suspect?" Lucas didn't flinch. "You saw the footage, and what Juno detected wasn't accidental. An hour into the audit, the first irregularity surfaced. 4 patients under Nurse Sloan's care had experienced sudden systemic reactions, each within an hour of medication rounds. All had survived, but only barely. Emergency interventions had been attributed to chemotherapy stressors, a catch-all used in complex cases where the real cause couldn't be isolated. "This isn't just oversight," Meera whispered, flipping through entries on her tablet. "Look, patient 509, Mason Willis. His records show a sudden spike in inflammatory markers after Sloan's shift, but the treatment logs show only routine medications." Dr. Brinks looked up sharply. "Do any of those logs have matching timestamps with the unregistered vial movements?" Lucas leaned forward. "There were no registered movements for that vial. That's the problem. But we do have surveillance timestamps for Sloan accessing off-limit prep areas." Another click through surveillance archives. Another clip revealed Nurse Sloan entering the isolation prep room with a medication tray, remaining inside just long enough to alter something out of the camera's view. "We've got a pattern," Brinks murmured, dread creeping into her voice. By late afternoon, they had cataloged 9 similar events, all tied to Sloan, all involving high-risk patients. Each case had followed a similar sequence: shift change, medication prep, an undocumented vial or action, followed by a rapid medical decline. Still, it wasn't enough for legal action. "What about past employment?" Lucas asked. "Where did she work before Northridge?" That's when things got stranger. HR pulled Sloan's personnel file. Her previous employment was listed as Hillsborough Mercy Hospital, a smaller facility across the state. On paper, her recommendations were glowing. No red flags. But when Brinks called the facility for verification, the response was brief and chilling. "We have no record of an Emily Sloan working here," they said flatly. Silence fell across the table. She had used a fake employment history. Lucas glanced down at Juno, who remained still, unblinking. "This isn't isolated," he said quietly. "She came here for a reason." Later that evening, Juno and Lucas returned to the hospital's lower level, the archives room. With permission from compliance, Lucas began combing through patient charts from the past 6 months, using flagged logs from the audit to trace back the earliest point Sloan could have started her tampering. 2 hours in, he came across the case of a child, Claire Donnelly, age 10, terminal leukemia. She had passed away during Sloane's overnight shift 4 months ago. Her deterioration had been swift and, according to notes, unexpected despite progressive stage. At the time, her vitals had been improving modestly. Lucas stared at the screen. Something didn't sit right. He compared Claire's final dose log to her previous rounds. A medication called regafrin was introduced only during her final week. No other patient in her ward had received it. When he looked up the drug's name in the database, it came back as inactive, a placebo compound used during clinical trials. But Claire had never been enrolled in a trial. How did this end up in her chart? He muttered aloud. He turned to Juno, who tilted her head, ears perking up at his tone. Someone used this child to experiment, Lucas whispered, bile rising in his throat. He snapped a photo of the log screen and forwarded it to Meera Patel and Dr. Brinks. By the time they called an emergency conference that night, the picture was starting to form. Multiple patients, multiple undocumented compounds, a falsified employment record, no external profit motive, no missing narcotics. The pattern defied logic unless you accepted one terrifying possibility. It wasn't theft. It was control. Back in the security office, Lucas stood staring at a wall of rotating camera feeds. Juno lay by the desk, her breathing steady, eyes never fully closing. She was alert even in rest. James Corrigan, the night supervisor, pulled up a chair beside him. "I heard about what you found," he said. Lucas nodded. "It's not about money. She's not stealing anything. She's manipulating care." "Why would someone do that?" Lucas didn't answer immediately. "There was a case a few years ago," he said slowly. "Different hospital. A tech kept adjusting ventilator settings just to be the first to respond to the alarms. Said it made her feel useful, needed. That's sick." "Yeah." Corrigan leaned forward. "You think Sloane's doing something like that?" "I think it's worse," Lucas replied. "I think she was controlling when and how people crashed. She created the emergencies so she could handle them. Gain trust. Look like the savior." Juno stirred suddenly. The door opened. A nurse stepped in, different from the others. Mid-40s, platinum hair pulled tight in a bun. No name badge. She paused when she saw Juno. "Sorry, wrong floor," she muttered and turned to leave. Lucas's instincts prickled. "Hold on," he said. The woman turned again. "I'm new. I was looking for pediatrics." Lucas stood slowly. "Name?" Her eyes flicked to Juno, who had now risen to her feet, standing quietly beside the desk. The nurse hesitated. Laura Sloane." Corrigan stepped in from behind. "We already flagged that surname." Lucas's breath caught. This wasn't over. And Nurse Emily Sloane may not have been working alone. Juno stood still, eyes locked on the unfamiliar nurse like a statue poised to strike. Every hair along her back bristled with silent authority. She did not bark. She did not move. She just waited, unblinking, knowing. Laura Sloane's hesitation was barely half a second, but Lucas caught it. He stepped closer. "You're not here by accident." She folded her arms slowly, her face blank. "I'm visiting a friend. She's upstairs." "Which friend?" Lucas asked. "Private matter." Lucas didn't answer. His radio clicked once. "Compliance needs you in room 3B immediately," came the voice. He responded, "I will be there shortly. Keep the room secure." As Laura Sloane turned to go, Lucas called to her, "We will need to verify your credentials before you access any restricted areas." She didn't reply. Juno remained by the doorway even after she left, staring down the hall long after she had disappeared around the corner. Lucas tapped the wall intercom. "Lock down all elevator access and notify hospital security. Track Nurse Sloane, potential accomplice." Downstairs in the secure conference room, Meera Patel and Dr. Brinks waited with stacks of charts and analysis results. The air was dense with dread. "We've identified 11 patients with unexplained deterioration during Sloan's night shifts," Mara began. "5 have since died. 3 were on recovery paths. 1 was even scheduled for release." Dr. Brinks tapped her pen against a chart. "The pattern is clear. All administered medications outside the system. All manipulated doses." Lucas scanned the data. All roads pointed to Sloan. Until now, he had thought this was about one woman with a delusion of control. But with the appearance of Laura, possibly a sister or close relative, something larger emerged. These weren't isolated choices. These were coordinated actions. A knock on the glass. Detective Rivas, assigned to the case after the audit broke statewide attention, entered with a sealed evidence box. "You'll want to see this," he said, setting it down. Inside were items recovered from a storage locker registered under a false name, hidden near a commercial clinic 30 miles from the hospital. What they found confirmed everyone's worst fears. Stacks of handwritten logs, patient records, medication combinations, symptom response pairings, Rivas explained. Some of these records go back over 6 years, different hospitals, different aliases. But the writing is the same. Mira sifted through the papers. These aren't just logs. They are studies, like she was testing something. Lucas recognized one name in the notes. Claire Donnelly. The child from 4 months ago. Her name was listed beside a series of chemical formulas and injection timings. There were even photos. Photos of patients during moments of acute medical crisis. It was all cold, methodical, calculated harm under the guise of care. And then came the bombshell. One sheet, separate from the rest, listed detailed employment instructions. It included forged documents, interview scripts, and a second set of credentials belonging to Laura Sloan. She was part of it, Lucas said. They were working together. Brinks sank into her chair. So she infiltrated the hospital under false records, used her role to experiment on patients, and she wasn't alone. Correct, Rivas confirmed. It's a network. We don't know how many others exist, but this is organized. Hours later, surveillance finally picked up Laura again, attempting to enter the maternity wing with a badge stolen from a discharged nurse. Juno intercepted her at the corridor, just like before. She turned back without protest. No explanation, no apology. But this time, no one let her walk away. Within 48 hours, Northridge Regional was at the center of a national medical investigation. The state medical board revoked all licenses related to the Sloan alias. Legal teams prepared charges, and every patient cared for under either name received emergency screenings. Juno and Lucas were pulled into every review meeting. No one questioned their presence now. In the days that followed, families began receiving answers. Lucas watched as many returned to the hospital, some to say thank you, others to grieve. There was no manual for what to say to parents who learned their children had suffered because someone wanted to feel important. But the truth was better than never knowing. Then came the case of Hannah Easton, a 6-year-old girl in ICU whose condition had worsened 2 nights before Juno's alert. She had developed a fever spike with no explanation. Lab results now showed traces of the same compound found in Sloan's possession. Juno's intervention had likely stopped a second dose from reaching her. Lucas visited her room quietly one morning. Her father stood by the bed, eyes red-rimmed but thankful. "She's stable," he whispered. "Doctors say it's manageable now." Lucas said nothing. He just nodded and looked at Juno, who had quietly approached the bedside and sat, tail curled neatly. Hannah opened her eyes. She didn't say anything either, but her small hand reached out and gently brushed the dog's paw. Her father whispered, "She hasn't responded to anything in 2 days." Juno remained perfectly still. She didn't move until Hannah's hand dropped back to the sheets. Then she let out a single soft whine and pressed her head against the mattress edge. Weeks passed. The hospital issued a public statement. Every detail of the audit, every exposed deception, they named Lucas and Juno in the release, citing their intervention as the turning point. Several families spoke during the press conference. Among them was Margaret Kessler's daughter, who had sat by her mother's side that night. "I didn't know what was wrong," she said, her voice cracking. "But the dog did. That dog saved my mother's life." Margaret herself, recovering slowly, joined by video call. Her voice was weak, but her words clear. "That animal saw what no one else could. Sometimes we put so much trust in appearances, we forget to trust instinct." The final audit tallied 19 patient tampering cases, 8 deaths, 11 survivors, all tied to 2 women, both hiding behind surgical masks, forged credentials, and the false image of compassion. But none of them escaped Juno's detection. On a quiet Sunday morning, Lucas and Juno stood at the edge of the hospital courtyard. New protocol signs had been installed at every entrance. ID verification upgrades, drug scanning policies, camera reinforcements. The hospital had changed. Lucas watched children in the play area, some hooked to IV poles, some walking slowly with physical therapists, but all laughing or trying to. One boy waved toward Juno and ran over with awkward steps, pulling an oxygen tank behind him. "You're the one who helped my friend," he said. "The girl with the blue cast. She told me you stopped the bad lady." Juno wagged her tail once. Lucas crouched. "She did. You feeling okay?" The boy nodded. "Can she stay here, like all the time?" Lucas smiled. "She'll be back. We've got more places to help." As they walked back toward the parking lot, Lucas paused at the security station where the original confrontation had happened. The corridor looked just as it had that night. Quiet, empty, but different now, safer. Juno slowed beside the ICU door. She looked at Lucas and wagged her tail again, softly this time. They both knew. She hadn't just stopped a single act of harm. She'd unveiled a pattern, exposed a system failure, and reminded everyone that trust wasn't about titles or uniforms. It was about instinct. It was about the bond between a handler and the one partner who never second-guessed danger. In the end, Juno hadn't barked to be noticed. She had refused to move because she already knew what the rest of them were only beginning to see. If that blew your mind, wait till you see what our next K9 story uncovers. It's even more shocking. So hit that like button, make sure you're subscribed, and turn on the bell, because the next one, you'll want to be first to see it.